You're listening to WMPG 90.9 Gorham, Portland, Southern Maine Community Radio from USM. Live from the Orion Cygnus arm of the Milky Way galaxy, this is Scientifically Speaking, a weekly half-hour program devoted to elegant curiosities, and I am one of your hosts, Sarah Chang, and joining me as always is Bernie Rhyme, DJ Star Watcher. How are you, Bernie?
Yes, hi, Sarah. Very good. Thank you.
Bernie is our professor of the astronomy lab here at USM and our local protector of the night skies. Reach out to us at WMPG Scientifically Speaking at gmail.com, or you can head over to WMPG.org to find the last 5 weeks of archives of all of your favorite shows, including this one. Bernie, could you let our listeners know what is up in the night sky for this coming week?
Yes, certainly. So this is Friday, May 5th. We're going to have a full moon. The May moon is also called the milk moon or the flower moon. So that's the full moon today. The days are getting longer. We're halfway into spring, so halfway to summer. That was actually May 1st, so just a few days past that. So sunrise now is 5:28 in the morning. It doesn't set till 7:48. The days are getting pretty long. And we're actually in an eclipse season. There will be a partial lunar eclipse somewhere on the Earth, but not visible for us. We just had a very rare hybrid solar eclipse back on April 20th. So the lunar one occurs 2 weeks before or after the solar one. So we're in that eclipse season, of course, getting ready for the big eclipse in May on April 8th. We'll have lots of shows coming up before then. So we have a couple evening planets. So just Venus and Mars are left in the evening sky, probably setting like an hour, a couple hours after sunset. And if you get up early, you can see Saturn in the morning sky. So that's pretty much it for this week.
Awesome. Thanks,
Okay.
Bernie.
Yeah, you're welcome.
And if you couldn't take notes fast enough, you can also check out the monthly What's Up column in the Portland Press Herald. So welcome to another episode of Scientifically Speaking. We are so thrilled to conclude our three-part series on meteorology and weather with our special guest Sarah Long from WMTW. And in today's show, we talk a little bit about her time and her experience traveling to Antarctica and what that was like, and maybe some of the implications that she observed as far as climate change and some of the impacts that she sees there and that we see here where we are in Maine. Recently,
Yes.
you went to the South Pole. Well, maybe not
No.
exactly
Not quite
the
that
South
far.
Pole. That's
No.
I guess that's wrong. The edge of the South Pole?
Yeah. I stepped foot on Antarctica along the Antarctic Peninsula.
Oh.
And my efforts to get down to Antarctica go back years and years and years. Previously we talked about how my career started on the top of Mount Washington for the observatory.
So you wanted to go somewhere colder.
Exactly. And so at the South Pole, the folks that staff the scientific station at the South Pole, they really like when people from the Mount Washington Observatory apply to work down there, because it's sort of it's a proving ground, right? You're isolated, you're in extreme conditions, you clearly don't mind the cold, the wind, and so you're already like steps above the other applicants. They know that you can handle that stuff. And so it's almost like there's a direct pipeline from the summit of Mount Washington to the South Pole. There have been so many observers who have gone on to go down and work at South Pole Station, sometimes just for the summer season, a lot of times for the entire year. And so I know several people who have done that. I chose to go in a different direction. However, it's been one of the things that I've always wanted to do. And I actually tried to get my station to let me go.
Like all expense paid type of thing?
Not all, but they wouldn't have to pay me because I would be working for the National Science Foundation and I believe, is it Raytheon maybe, or maybe it was Raytheon.
Oh,
Anyway, so
wow.
for the people who staff
Yeah.
the South Pole Station taking weather observations, I tried to get them to let me take off for 4 months, and they said, I don't think so. No, we don't want to have to fill that shift for 4 months, so you're not going to be able to do that. And so it was my goal to get down there somehow, and the opportunity came up. It was a vacation. But of course, I couldn't turn off my meteorology mind, and so I took notes every day, and came back and produced a bunch of segments for the station, because I just wanted to share it with everybody. I mean, it's just so breathtaking, and I stopped calling it a trip of a lifetime because I am convinced I will go back.
Oh, okay, good. Yes.
Maybe I'll go to the north, the north first, and the Arctic Circle before I go back to Antarctica. But I feel like I'm going to say this. I just experienced the tip of the iceberg.
That's it. Iceberg. That's the iceberg. Yeah.
And drum sound.
So you actually got to stand on land, not
Yes.
like ice.
Yes, on land.
There's
Yep.
land under the ice.
There is.
Yeah.
Yep. It was it was a 2-week trip to get down there.
Oh, wow. Wait,
a
from...
2-week trip total, I should say.
Oh, okay. I was like, wow, that's a
Yeah,
long
right,
time.
right. We walked.
Yeah, you walked.
Just kidding.
I was like, that's longer than for us to get to the moon.
Yeah, right.
I know, yeah. 3 days. Oh.
No, so it was a 2-week trip total, but it was a long time to get down there. So we flew I went with a good friend of mine who loves weather as well. But she's a speech language pathologist. Anyway, so
Wait, what do you mean, but?
But
Professional.
right. She tells me when I'm saying my words incorrectly, or I'm not. Yeah. So we flew into Buenos Aires in Argentina, and were there for 2 nights, sort of letting everybody else who was going to be on the ship catch up. And then we all flew down to Ushuaia from Buenos Aires. That's about 3 hours south.
Is that like a island?
No, it's the southernmost tip of Argentina.
Okay, yeah.
Yep. Southernmost town, I believe, period, on the globe.
Oh,
like actual town.
Yeah.
And it's actually, it reminded me a lot of Portland. They've got, you hear different numbers, but I've heard anywhere from 70,000 to 100,000 people.
Wow.
And they, of course, have these big cruise ships that come in, and a very touristy downtown area. It just really reminded me a lot of Portland. So it was
Is
kinda
it like
neat.
a similar weather climate?
No, it is definitely cooler. So we went in January, which is summer down there. So it was, Ushuaia was in the 50s.
Oh, wow.
And and once we got down to the Antarctic Peninsula, you go through the Drake Passage, and a couple of days later, you finally start to see some ice, and you see the peninsula, and temperatures were actually really comfortable in the 30s for the most part. Yeah.
It's like
Good
a
for
regular.
Yeah.
Summer,
Yeah, right?
30 degrees, yeah.
My kind of summer. I do not like the heat, remember? Yeah. So, but Drake Passage, you've probably heard about. It's some of the roughest seas in the world. You have the Atlantic and the Pacific coming together, and you have that cold water coming from the Antarctic and the upwelling there, which actually makes it really rich for marine life, biodiversity, which is incredible. But it was amazing. You can actually feel, once we passed over the current, you could actually feel the temperature drop.
Oh, wow.
Like 10 degrees. Yeah, it was pretty cool. So you knew you were getting close. And our trip down wasn't too bad on the Drake Passage. It can be wild. And on our trip back through the Drake Passage, we had about 20-foot seas.
Wow.
And they said the crew and the captain were talking about how once it reaches 40-foot seas, that's when they come up with an alternative plan. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, like we can't even walk down the hallway
Yeah, and that was nothing
without
for
bumping
them.
into things.
That was
And
nothing.
Did you have to like strap in?
We did not, but some of the things I took pictures of are like it was a nice cruise ship. The like grand piano was like strapped down to the floor, and things. There were seasickness bags. Do I say barf bags? There were barf bags, like every 6 feet around the boat. Like on the railings, they were hanging there. And so I remember the first time I got onto the boat and I got into the elevator, and I saw like 3 different containers of barf bags hanging there, and I was like, oh gosh, what have I gotten myself into? But you didn't have me on to talk about seasickness bags, right? You want to hear about the ice and the penguins.
Yeah, so what was it like when you actually got there?
Oh my goodness. So seeing, I guess maybe I would consider getting there as seeing my first whale. And our first whale that we got to see was an orca.
Oh, wow.
And it was interesting. So we're on a boat, and there were a handful, probably a dozen actually, of naturalists that were on the boat as well. Which was awesome. So they could answer all of our questions, and they were just as excited to see the wildlife as we were. And so you sort of learn that humpbacks, the first time we saw a group of humpback whales, the captain made an announcement, and we all made sure that we went and we looked. But then they kind of become, I don't know, like squirrels in your
See 'em
backyard,
all the time, right?
You're like, oh, another humpback whale. And I realize how lucky I am to be able to say that I saw that. I mean, I say that jokingly because it was just magical every single time.
Did you see them jump out, or
yes.
were most?
Breaching the water, but orcas, they would always stop the boat, make an announcement, or even change track a little bit so that we could go see.
I thought you meant the orcas would stop the boat and make
an
announcement. I was like,
wouldn't that be great?
Pretty smart whales.
Yeah, right. And our captain was an orca. But the orcas, it seems, they would always go out of their way to make sure that we were able to see them in the wild. But yeah, I mean, we would get onto these little, smaller boats. We would call them Zodiacs. And we would get within 10 feet of where these whales were coming up out of the water. I mean, it was just magical.
Wow.
Absolutely magical. And that's not even talking about the penguins, which were smellier than you might think. But so cute. And
what kind, emperors or other kinds too?
Not emperors. So we saw gentoo penguins. We saw chin straps and Adelie.
So no rock hoppers?
Nope.
That was cute, the rock hoppers.
Yeah, no. Oh, they have like the funny.
Yeah, exactly.
It's funny. I'm making this.
Yeah, right.
Bernie across the table. I'm putting my fingers up on my forehead, but they have the things coming out of. Yeah. No, we didn't see those, but before we would get on. First, we saw some swimming, and then when we were about to make landfall, the naturalists explained, listen, we're going to go and put down flags on the paths that we want you to walk. You're going to see that there are other paths that are made by the penguins. We call those penguin highways. I know.
Don't walk on them.
Don't walk on those. And so, we would land, and there would be penguins sort of at the beaches to greet us, like checking us out, like what's going
nice
on?
Of them.
Welcome wagon. Yeah. But we were told, of course, don't approach the penguins. So stay, 5 feet or so away, but also know that the penguins have no fear of you. And so they will go wherever they want to go. And if they get close to you, just don't go, touching them. And it's true. They would walk right past us, right?
Yeah.
We were just kind of like in their way.
Yeah.
They're like, oh, you guys again, right? And by the time that we would be leaving, they would have taken over our pathways
Oh,
as like some of their little highways. So I think they were kind of like, hey, thanks guys, this is
Yeah, right.
making our life easier.
Yeah. So how many cruise ships go down there? So they get really used to people, or?
It's not
Yeah.
because they're used to people. They just don't. We're just not.
They haven't been massively slaughtered.
Yeah,
or...
exactly.
Oh,
Right.
okay.
We're not a predator,
Yeah.
and so they just they're just like,
Yeah.
they're cool with us.
Okay.
Yeah.
We haven't been hurt by them before.
Exactly. But I don't know the exact number of cruise ships. I think I did like right after I got home, and we had been sort of talking about it quite a bit. But what I can tell you is that they all work together through a treaty to make sure that only a certain number of people are actually on land at the same time.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So
It
that's
doesn't get
limited
overused.
in terms of how many people can get off the boats, which boats are where, and all in an effort to keep it pristine. When we were getting ready to actually through the Drake Passage, because I think they were looking to keep us entertained. That's when we did a lot of the cleaning of our outer gear. And so we have specially issued boots that we would wear that were just pretty much just rubber boots, but we would scrub them off. Not only initially, but we would scrub them before and after we would go on the Zodiac boats to make landfall. We also would have to vacuum down all of our outerwear, and especially the Velcro. The staff would actually, the crew and naturalists would help us like go through all of the Velcro and pick out anything that might be left behind, so that we're not leaving behind even strands of hair or threads or seeds or pollen, anything. They wanted to make sure that all of that was cleaned off of our outerwear. So there's a lot of care that goes into getting people safely onto the ice and back off of the ice as well. Certainly there's an impact. I'm not naive to that. And so I think coming back, my job is to sort of bring these stories and these images back to other people so they can experience it, even just through my photographs and videos and stories of what a magical and pristine place this is. And so, and how far-reaching climate change and our impact is on the Earth. So there are going to be lots of people that never get down to Antarctica, but hopefully the pictures of the whales and the icebergs and penguins sort of live in their mind, and through my stories, hopefully they realize how everything is so interconnected.
Yeah. Could you actually talk a little bit about how being there has changed or maybe impacted your perspective on climate change? And I don't know if you saw like evidence of maybe, I don't know if there's devastation there or those kinds of changes.
It's I think more so talking with the naturalists who go back month after month and year after year, and hearing them say that the things that we were seeing while we were there would be totally different, even just a month and certainly a year down the road, because it's so changeable. And just learning, it's so massive, the walls of ice down there, the glaciers, and learning that really the issue is the ice that is holding back the land glaciers. Once that melts, there's nothing to stop all of that ice that is over Antarctica from getting into our oceans, and that's where we're talking about devastating sea level rise. So, think of it like a cork.
Yeah.
These ice walls at the barrier at the edge are sort of keeping back a lot of the ice. And as soon as those are broken apart, and certainly some of them have started to melt away, there's no putting them back. And it's a little disheartening knowing, what little is, certainly we are making some strides. At least people are talking about it. People are aware. But you look at the numbers of our CO2 emissions, and you just hope that we could do better. And I'm glad that I I feel really lucky that I was able to go down and see those things. But I really don't know how much longer they're going to stay as pristine as they are. We were already seeing evidence of, previous incarnations of people down there from the whaling industry, ages ago. And although not too long ago, but ages ago, some of the shipwrecks from that, some of the old weather equipment that has been left behind. And all of that is now considered, I forget what they said, but basically it's part of the history now and it's not to be removed. But it's also evidence of just how we've had our hand on even these remote places and have been impacting them for decades.
Yeah.
Are there any estimates on the time factor of when that cork might kind of
I think it's different around the continent itself. I know that the Antarctic Peninsula is warming faster than some of the other portions of Antarctica. And so the peninsula is actually warming at 5 times the rate of the global average. And so I think that's where we're going to start to see some of the real vulnerabilities. I don't study glaciers. I know that there are plenty of people, even people from UMaine who study glaciers quite a bit. And they certainly have some answers, to that effect. But one of the things that we don't have is a really extensive weather record of conditions across the entire continent. We have ice cores that are useful in telling us the historical, climate, but we just don't have a lot of current weather data. We have the station at the South Pole, and we have research stations, which are typically closer to the shoreline. But it's such a massive continent. Yeah. So, but there are people who are working on getting those automated stations placed. So that we can have the more data, the more we can tell how things are changing and how quickly.
Yeah.
Are you pessimistic about or
am I pessimistic? I am. I'm disappointed that we spent so long arguing the point of our changing globe and our climate, and that I'm glad that some folks have caught up. But I also think that a lot of pressure has been put on the individual, and sometimes that can feel very, very heavy when in actuality we really need major change from the top down. So there are things that we can do, and certainly every time you spend $1 on something, right, you're casting your vote.
Yep.
And so I do things like we have solar panels. We only drive electric cars in our household. We have heat pumps. So but we're lucky enough to be able to do that as well. So there are changes we can make. My husband's vegan. I'm vegetarian. That certainly is a big part of it too, and how our environment's affected. But ultimately, it's going to take us voting the right people in who take this seriously.
Yeah. People need to be involved in all those levels, definitely.
Yeah. What about you guys? I'm curious to hear how you feel about it.
I think Bernie
I'm always optimistic.
Bernie is the
I think
optimist.
I like
Sarah's
it.
less optimistic. Yeah.
I mean, the way that you're describing it, and I'm starting to feel scared. I mean,
That big cork,
maybe that's
I
not
never
the
really
right
heard that
way to
before,
say it,
but-
but
Yeah.
the way
Frightening.
that you described, there's just going to be this huge break, and for me, when I see, I saw the photos of the penguins, and you think about these animal populations that they can't do anything.
Right.
And so I just feel sad for that.
Yes.
Because it's oh, maybe I can run away and I can move up to a mount, higher up on an elevation and escape, rising
Right.
sea levels and all that stuff. But what are they going to do?
Right.
Right.
Well, and just to make you feel a little bit better.
Yeah, right. We gotta,
some of the animals will adapt as well. And, we see that in migrations, right?
Yeah.
And how we're starting to see different species that are arriving in places where they've never been before. And so that is sort of their way of, like you said, like going to the mountaintop, right? And like trying to get into a more comfortable climate. And so the animals do adapt to that. But you're right. There are some that will have a really have a much more difficult time. And so, one of the big concerns about Antarctica is with warming seas and with climate change in general, the krill will have a tough time surviving in the same numbers that we're seeing. And they actually need the base of these ice sheets and also icebergs to, that's their habitat. And with the krill actually feeds most of the wildlife down in Antarctica. So when we start to see the krill impacted, of course, that just leads to all sorts of impacts up the food chain. And also people have started farming krill. And, that's going to have an impact as well. And so we can do certain things like not buy supplements or other things that are advertised as having krill in them. And again, it all goes back to you vote with your dollar, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So to end on a maybe a more beautiful note,
Yes.
I do want to know, what was the night sky like?
Oh, well. And Bernie, maybe
Yes.
you know the answer to this as well. We didn't get a lot of night sky.
Really?
Usually
Yeah,
true.
because it was summertime. And so we would have a little bit of a dusky sky from about 11 o'clock at night till about 2:30, 3 o'clock in the morning, but never truly dark enough to like really get that night sky experience. Yeah.
Because
Yeah, their
otherwise
days were
You would have seen southern lights too and all kinds
Yeah.
of things. But it's
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
in summer. It's too
Yeah.
much
Thought
light.
about that.
Yep. So, but that's a good question, and not the first time that somebody has asked me that. And yeah.
So
Yep,
you had basically like 23 and a half hours of pure
pretty
daylight.
much. Yeah. I would say 20. We probably had about 20 to 21 hours of pure daylight, and then like a few hours of dusk or dawn. Yeah.
How
but
was your
that,
circadian rhythm?
right?
Yeah.
Luckily, there were blackout drapes, but I'll tell you, it was
Yeah.
really hard to go to sleep knowing that you might miss something, especially once you were along the peninsula. So to sort of help you end on that happy note, I do want to say one of the things that really surprised me was, I knew that I'd be excited about seeing the wildlife, right? The penguins and the birds. And but what I missed the most right off the bat was the ice.
Oh.
And, we got just for those 5 days of sailing amongst the icebergs and right along land along the peninsula, you just get used to seeing these huge shelves of ice just coming out of the water and, of course, ice-covered peaks. And then once you start to get back into the Drake Passage to go home, it's just flat water. Well, if you're lucky, it's flat water. Yeah, for a little while anyway. But,
20-foot
it's
waves.
just water. And when you look out, there are no icebergs. And you're like, oh, no, where are the icebergs? They were so great. But they were just, and the way the light hit everything was so magical.
That blue light coming through the ice and stuff. Yeah.
Yep, and the way that it was reflecting off of, we actually didn't have a lot of clear days. It was cloudy quite a bit. But in the evening, it seemed to clear off a little bit, and just seeing the alpenglow, that like pink glow on some of the icebergs and some of the land ice that was, as the sun was getting lower in the horizon. It's just magical.
All right. Well, as we close, thank you so much, Sarah, for joining us here on WMPG 90.9. I do have a couple jokes.
Yes. Okay. Let's see. Yes, you have some weather jokes that you've been bottled up here. All right. Let's hear them.
All right. What happens when a meteorologist gets angry?
Ooh. Bernie, do you have a guess?
Something with a storm, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know.
Actually, Bernie, you got it. They storm out.
They storm
Oh, okay. Pretty good.
I love it.
Okay.
All right. Well,
This has been a pleasure. Thank you so
Thank
much
you
for
so
having me
much.
on.
Yeah.
you have been listening to Scientifically Speaking here on WMPG 90.9 with myself, Bernie, and Sarah Long from WMTW. Stay tuned for Democracy Now! And from your favorite nerds, we hope you do something about this whole climate change thing and do your part and help to vote in the people that you think are going to advocate for us and our future.
And tell a few jokes.